to give a shout out to our fellow brother, new brother, right? Rob, who's also part of the um, crypto community, especially Jasmy. And I did a collaboration with him. He's Crypto Future. If you're not aware of who he is, give him a follow. But in the collaboration, we just touched bases on a few things, talking about, for instance, some of the key things that are on the minds of a lot of people. Obviously, when it comes to the fourth quarter lockup, everybody's always asking about that all the time. We've covered that. Always talking about like, is the PDL going to get kicked? Kick the can further down the road. I don't necessarily think so, but like I also pointed out to Rob was I'd rather have Jasmy get it right with this than getting it wrong. So with that said, take a look into this for a second. And we're going to be talking about some things tonight you might not have ever been aware of. I'm just going to be honest, like ever, right? So we're going to begin with some things. And for one, I want to give you guys just a brief intro. So this is kind of part of my research, to say the least. You got to keep in mind, this whole thing of Internet of Things, it gets kind of worn out, mentioned all the time. Maybe you get tired of hearing about it. But like I was telling Rob, for all the naysayers are saying that, like, Internet of Things is not a big deal. Shoot, you are using Internet of Things. Like, even your phone is technically IoT. How do we know that? Well, the centralized marketplaces, your GAFAs of the world, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, take that data and they freaking monopolize on something fierce. Now, Jasmy, of course, is an industry disruptor of that. For most of us that are into Jasmy, you already know that. For some of you newcomers, well, welcome to the show. But the importance of Internet of Things and Jasmy's specific role in that, especially when it comes to data democracy, finance democracy, and even AI. As we know, we're going to scale to the next layer 2 solution. It's going to be a big, big deal, especially in my opinion. As we know, IoT refers to the growing network of physical objects embedded with sensors. And when we get further into this outline, we're even going to mention the likes of like Tesla, right? As we know, a lot of IoT sensors with Tesla. But it's important to understand this new world and how people are going to conduct business in the future. So 4 main things I want to talk to you guys about tonight before we get really into the nitty gritty. And that is why IoT, the Internet of Things, is so darn important. So the first thing, let's talk about this. It's this increased efficiency, automation. When we get more into the outline, talk about Tesla, Elon Musk, and all that. Yeah, automation, sensors, and data collected from connected devices, like whether it's my connected device or just being here broadcasting is a connected device to a sense. Everything is listening to my, presentation to you guys. If I start talking about barbecue grills or start talking about, a video game that I want or a clothing line, like, I don't know, Calvin Klein or something like that, at some point later today, things are going to start popping up on my feed. And that's a centralized data marketplace that wants to, bring me advertisements and ads thinking that appeals to me. But it's a market, it's important, and it has a lot of value. Well, these sensors and this data, they're connected to all these devices for all these automated tasks, is a very, very big deal. And it does improve efficiency to a sense in various sectors, such as manufacturing, transportation, and of course, something that I feel as though Jasmy really stands out, and that is energy management. Hence why we've done quite a few different deep dives when it comes to Tadashi Morita and what he brings to the table when it comes to the whole concept of energy. IoT in itself also brings what they call improved decision making. And this part, I think, if anything, is going to help even Elon Musk and Tesla for the future if he was to recognize Jasmy. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen, okay? But keep in mind, data insights from connected devices can provide valuable information for businesses and individuals to make better informed decisions. Have you ever researched Jasmy to the point We understand the whole concept of what they call platinum data as a service. Remember all that stuff in the past? Platinum data, not gold data, platinum data. That's very valuable data. So when you ride on a ride share or things like that, here in the United States, maybe there's not enough emphasis on collecting that specific data, but over in smart cities in Japan, they want to pair their citizens up with other unique citizens that have the same types of likes, dislikes as the next person. Say what you want. Maybe it prevents violence from breaking out, or maybe as the saying goes, hey, wouldn't it be better to have a conversation with people that are like-minded individuals compared to, hey, this guy's a you-know-what bag? Say what you want. That kind of sounds cool, right? So IoT can contribute to, for instance, enhanced user experiences. At the end of the day, aren't we all here to a sense to have an enhanced user experience, whether it's a video game or whether it's a virtual, you know, um, virtual reality, going to watch a movie? That's an enhanced movie experience or experience in itself. Like nowadays, you have reclined seats. So there's all sorts of different examples when it comes to those enhancements. But connected devices in itself can personalize experiences, provide real-time information, and offer new services and, of course, functionalities. This is right up Jasmy's alley, 110%. This fourth or maybe possibly fifth thing, according to my list, it will create new business opportunities. The IoT in itself opens the doors for innovative business models and services based on data collection, analysis, and of course, insights. The vast amount of data generated by IoT also raises concerns, as we know, about privacy. And that is what I want to get into tonight. Because when it comes to privacy, Jasmy seems to be leading the charge, at least as far as Japan is concerned, in that spectrum, because they understand that that is a problem that exists in Japan. But how about this for size? What about the whole thing with X, formerly known as Twitter? We'll get into that in a bit. What I want to share with you guys tonight is this. The whole concept of supply and demand is one of the main topics that we're talking about tonight. That's why I shared with you the whole thing about stacks. My new research that I want to present is this. This is some of it. This is an outline. And that is this. This comes from a site by the name of datacommercecloud.com. You can look it up yourself. And this is a particular post, and the title is called Data Marketplace Guide. And I'm not going to get into all of this, so I went ahead and dropped it down to these key areas, and of course zoomed in for you guys can see it, especially if you're Boomer effing Sooner watching this show from his couch with his lovely dog. But this whole thing of the current state of a data marketplace today, say what you want, it is the innovators, it is the industry disruptors that can have tremendous amount of value. And what is a perfect example of that? Well, it's Bitcoin when it first started. You know, some people didn't understand the concept of Bitcoin, and it seemed kind of crazy. Maybe some people heard about it, maybe they didn't. Maybe they labeled Bitcoin as a scam. But back to the whole thing of this. The state of data marketplaces today. Different kinds of data marketplaces that you'll counter in the industry, and some possible trajectories for data marketplaces and their various users, of course, in the future. Let's talk about that for just a brief moment. The future and what that could possibly look like for you, especially being a Jasmy holder, because if you are a true Jasmy holder, you've been hodling the living hell out of this, have you not? And if anything, maybe you're tempted to give in to the FUD. But let's begin right here, like it says, with the most prevalent kind of data marketplace and the core user group. Public data marketplaces and the commercial data providers which sell just that, data. How much is this data actually worth? Now, some people say, man, it's already worth a lot because look what happened with Google. They didn't get to where they got if they didn't understand the concept of data, and I would agree with you. Back to this whole thing for a moment. Our phones, IoT, anything IoT, Bluetooth devices, you name it. Say what you want, but I do remember a time, basically the 90s, where we didn't have all this technology, the Internet of Things and so on. Instead, what we had was that version of Web 1. But when we talk about the whole thing of Web3, we're talking about a whole different realm, you know, and we're not fully at Web3 yet. But understanding that there is a difference between when Google was founded and it was like a glorified search engine, but then it became the search engine and it became more than just an indexing platform. It became a centralized data marketplace. And with that said, all this data that's being collected on my peasant class phone, as Mike Cornwell always points out, my Android, or you with your iPhone, where the case be, your data is collected day in and day out. Japan in itself recognizes that they want to lead the charge when it comes to being a disruptor for bringing data privacy back to the citizens of Japan, but not just them, the regions of Southeast Asia, and hopefully the main goal, places like America, Europe, other places in the world, and so on. I want you guys to understand this. Prevalent kinds of data marketplaces, their user groups, but this statement of 75% of major data providers are using public data marketplace. That's very, very true. And how a public data marketplace is huge, right? Very, very huge. And how about this part? Firms that use cybersecurity, consulting firms. Remember how Jasmy has those connections to consulting firms? They are using public data marketplaces for data sourcing. They give data as a service. Remember, we researched this in the past. Jesse, maybe Rob, you name it. IC Amphibian, DAAS. Now, before we talked about SaaS, as in software as a service, but what about DAAS? Huge companies have a pool of potential buyers with leads spanning many verticals. Data integration, like it says, the prerequisites for selling via a public data marketplace like DataRaid, not Haterade, DataRaid, enable providers to list data products which market their offering without having to sync their data to the marketplace. They only need to upload a sample preview. This way, providers can only collect inbound leads with no delay or painful integration. Public data marketplaces were just like B2C marketplaces. A retailer selling shoes can create listings in their various products and publish it basically in that marketplace, but the stock itself resides with the provider. They retain full control over their product, and there's no complication associated with getting the product to their marketplace. When listing is made, what's purchased or the provider is responsible for fulfillment, true. And the same is true for data providers who are able to deliver the data to the buyer without third-party interference via the method works best for them. Now, I know that's a lot to take in, and it seems like, wow, like maybe you're just like, I kind of understand the whole thing of centralized marketplaces, but you don't get the whole thing of decentralized marketplace, and we're going to get into that. But I do love this statement for a second, because we did talk about, where we're at with, I think I used this example, on Rob's show, right? Crypto Future. So when the internet first started with Google and so on, I should say with Google and so on, there's other ones, right? I was telling them I was using Yahoo, and then before maybe it was like Ask Jeeves for search engines. But the point was Google emerged as being like a go-to platform. Think about it for a second. When people say, search for something, they don't say search for something, right? Go search for this on the World Wide Web. Nobody talks like that. People say, Google it, or me and the gamers would say, Google it, noob, right? You Google it. Just like when you drink cola, you don't drink cola. Most people say I drink a Coke. I know a lot of Pepsi fans here, right? But there's standards, right? Because those products, those services became the standard, all right? So my point is this part, where it talks about these integration of blockchain check to ensure data streams over a platform that's encrypted. Nokia data marketplace. Remember all those Nokia phones back in the day, flip phones and so on? Say what you want. I mean, those are just like phones, but they're not smartphones. Smartphones took data collection to a whole new world, right? But Nokia data marketplace is a good example blockchain marketplace. These data marketplaces are referred as decentralized data marketplaces. Now, you may be wondering, where is Max going with this? This is where I'm going with this. Jasmy we talk about the disruptors. They're also getting involved with decentralized data marketplaces. Well, what kind of value is there? Well, again, we're going to get into all this. I know it's a lot to be mentioned, but you guys know me. I do these deep dives. They are powered by the blockchains, so they could protect the anonymity of users, making buying and selling data more safe for both parties. More safe for more parties. Okay. Who is the connector? Who's the plug? Who's the connect? When we have something like Jasmy, think about this for a second, because a lot of emphasis is always about on data democratization and all this and all that, not so much on finance and not so much on storage. That data is worth something. It needs to be stored somewhere, does it not? So data markets are in fact two-sided markets, and we're going to get to that in here in a second, where commodities are exchanged. Back to the whole thing about Bitcoin. Beautiful thing about Bitcoin is, a lot of people feel as though Bitcoin is not security, it's a commodity, right? We've looked at the supply side of beneficiaries of data markets, and now let's look at the demand side. Public data markets are making it easier than ever for buyers to find the right data. But this whole thing about a two-sided market, what is the example of a two-sided market? Well, when I pulled it up, I came up with this information that was straight from this thing called DataRaid. And basically speaking, here it is. This is a 2024 report, January, to be honest. If I give you guys something a little bit new. What you will see here, in my opinion, is a blueprint example of what you're literally going to see in Japan, especially when it comes to Jasmy, when they scale up to this layer 2. Because as we know, Jasmy is looking to do what? Have these pairings, especially with DD Coin, and to be able to give power to its users to be able to monetize their data. On the top right, you see two key things. You see, for one, a data marketplace. True. You also see being able to monetize data. This is the ultimate guide to the data marketplace in 2024, and this was published by Lucy Kelly January 23rd. So in reality, I mean, like what, a week ago? It mentions that data marketplaces are soaring in popularity. So if you're the type of guy in which you're like, I just don't see the whole thing of Jasmy, because Jasmy scam, understand decentralized data marketplaces and the industry disruptors, right? Again, Japan, Jasmy, the whole mix, that are part of that mix. They're a one-stop shop for buying and selling external data, like we mentioned before. But this part, data providers, they maximize data monetization through what? Data democratization. They have this guide about this marketplace, 2024, give you a little brief thing about all of this stuff. But back to this whole definition of a two-sided market. This two-sided market are places for exchanging commodities. The markets themselves do not own the commodities which are being traded. Rather, they have a space for connecting the two sides, buyers, sellers, customers, vendors, demand to supply. You get the picture. Data markets, two-sided markets. There's the data provider, which is looking to commercialize their data assets. And there's the data buyer who wants to find a data source which meets the requirements. Data markets work best to benefit both parties, which are more, or why more companies are turning to them to unlock successful data strategies. Wow. Now, this is just an example of a product, right? For like over here. What if you have something that works with the government, right? The Japanese government. And what if you have another one that's regulatory compliant in a place that is the hardest, right, compared to the United States to be regulatory compliant? Again, Jasmy stands out. How do marketplaces emerge? I'm not going to get into that. But there's more data out there. And this is some of the juicy stuff I want to get into. And then trust me, it's going to get better. The big data market keeps growing, reached 274 billion, in value in 2022, according to International Data Corporation. This market growth has been caused by exponential increase in data generation itself. And what is it mainly attributed to? Oh yeah, that's right. Boil it, mash it, stick it in the stew, because it's IoT and web scraping tools. What is a problem that exists in Japan? Well, too much data scraping. So does that not grab your attention? Well, how so? Back to this. Because in reality, according to data raid marketplaces and all this stuff, you have to realize that you have this whole thing of automated examples of how this is all done. Look at this for a second. I'm going to go down to this part. Talks about Databricks, for instance. I'm going to go back for a second. AI, because we know what Jasmy's trying to do with AI. So it says, when it comes to the use cases for data, none is receiving more attention at the moment than artificial intelligence. And what is Jasmy trying to do right now as we speak with scaling up? They're trying to create a layer 2 scaling solution in AI blockchain. So that's such a bold statement. Countless articles have been written about the importance of external data for training generative AI models. I mean, I know this isn't a Casper segment, but say what you want. Even if you don't hold Casper, I would look more into that. We talked about that. IBM, Casper, going to lead the industry in generative AI and how that industry is worth what? 7.9 trillion, not by 2030, you guys. It's annually. So look at this. In response to this public data, marketplaces are developing with a specific use case in mind. Marketplaces with a specific use case in mind. Doesn't this solidify a little bit more about the use case and understanding the greater picture of what Jasmy is trying to accomplish? Databricks, this is getting good. Databricks, for example, is directing its open data marketplace squarely towards buyers. AI, ML, and analytics use cases. Databricks allows buyers to access data, ML models, notebooks, applications. Come on, guys, look at this for a second. Notebooks, Avita with Jasmy, right? Applications. Think about it for a second. Maybe like Jasmy Secure PC and things like that. So Jasmy has all these things. I think a lot of people just kind of take lightly. I'm just going to be honest about that. But when I got more into this, I said to myself, is there more about data democratization? And if so, does this have anything about it? The answer is yes. There's this example about Snowflake Marketplace. And no, this is not talking about a bunch of people. Never mind. Let's not make it political. But Snowflake Marketplace offers free data products sourced from IMF, NOEMA, and Carto. And it's a great consequence of data democratization. Public data marketplaces are promoting data for good by welcoming free data sets, open access to external data, fueling research, innovation, both within and outside the private sector. Who is doing it both inside and outside the private sector? Jasmy's currently doing that. When Jasmy first came out, they addressed a lot of things in regards to the pandemic. You see that example here as well. Health authorities and health startups alike could use a data set, for instance, in regards to that and the pandemic and so on, for free, data for free from Snowflake to inform policy and improve medical treatment. Again, if you research Jasmy more, that's currently happening in Japan. And back to this, because it gets better. I know this is quite the outline, but I really couldn't believe the stuff I was reading earlier. Because we know when it comes to Jasmy, we know that we've researched quite a bit when it comes to Tizawit. We researched Kujit, and we researched a lot when it comes to SaaS, software as a service. So more software as a service providers are enabling businesses to build a private data marketplace. Yeah, but what about the connectors? What about the ones that are tied into blockchain and DLT? And what about the ones that are connected to an actual government? And what about the ones that are the Bitcoin in Japan, the first one to become regulatory compliant in that country? Right, Jasmy. Does this further solidify? Am I done talking about it? No. But the private data marketplace, owned and operated by the data provider who controls access permissions and parties granted access to their data. Remember how we were talking about through Guardian with Jasmy, granting parties access to their data? Does it all match up? Does it all make sense for you? It's a model that expected to grow in popularity in the future. But Jasmy, oh, don't move. I don't like it. Scam. as new software is making it easier to build a private data marketplace. Oh my goodness, what new software could that be? Well, things like, for instance, the Jasmy Secure PC. That's software. And there's examples here. All right. This part, before we get done with this page, because it's too much, right? Too much. I don't want to make this a 4-hour show. Private data marketplace is typically catered to a specific industry or niche use case. Limited, the audience smaller than the TAM of a public data marketplace, specifically works for some data providers. Here's an example. Certain financial data providers don't offer data for which there's mainstream demand. Financial data providers. This again further pounds it home on the research about do not dismiss Jasmy when it comes to taking them serious when it comes to finance democracy and the whole concept of cross-border payments. I know. I can't stress that enough. I still don't think mainstream, will even recognize them yet. But they have a solution. Jasmy has a solution. It makes more sense for providers to run private data marketplace accessibly only to investment accounting firms who need this data to be sustained and dependable. Accounting firms. Who is the head honcho when it comes to PR, right? You know where I'm going with this. Hiroshi Harada, aka Hudson. Remember his background? KPMG? Remember in regards to accounting and CPA? I think he has a CPA in the past, right? Isn't that right up his alley? Doesn't he have experience in that? So again, why share all this? Well, there's a lot to be mentioned, and I won't get into all of it, but basically, I want to share this part, and that is this. Getting a little bit more towards Elon Musk, Japan, and all that stuff. So it's this alignment of a vision. Aside from IoT, because I talked your guys' heads off tonight about IoT, the increase in web scraping technology has contributed to big data revolution. Are you part of that revolution? The answer is yes, because you hold Jasmy. Web scraping tools are a way of crawling the internet for content. We talked about that before. Has been posted on numerous outlets, engine, queries like, your Googles and so on. Social media platforms. Yeah, no kidding. They collect that data all day long. Facebook, right? Video sharing sites, blogs, all this stuff. The content is called user-generated content. Can be separated into text, visual, audio content. Web scraping tools enable users to harness this data, at scale and on demand. It's estimated that per minute, 500,000 tweets are shared, 3.6 million Google searches are processed, and 42 million WhatsApp messages are shared. That's a lot of user-generated content, given that web scraping tools are capable of crawling vast amounts in seconds. This is why you get the expression of what, guys? Digital oil, right? This is the new oil, as the saying goes. IoT web scraping are part of what caused over 2.5 quintillion bytes of data to be created globally every day in 2017. And this is going to get to the key areas of our main highlight of the night. So that was back in 2017. This is only going to increase with a total volume of data created worldwide worldwide expected to reach 149 zettabytes by 2045. Do you even know what a zettabyte is? And when we get more into what a zettabyte is, I think, if anything, this is where we should actually call Jasmy the Bitcoin in Japan, because again, it kind of reminds me of this whole concept of what Michael Sayer was talking about with block sizes and how much, he was like, hold on to this forever, because literally you're storing digital gold, if you will. But back in the 1800s, 1900s, and so on, there was a great big boom for actual oil, right? And those booms created a lot of money. So when we talk about digital oil, right, and the value of this, with something like a total volume of data created worldwide expected to reach 149 zettabytes by 2045, well, some of you guys are going to say, well, forget 2045. When moon? 2025, I might be able to wait to 2040, 2030, which makes me want to take you to this, because look at this. Simple search. A zettabyte. What is a zettabyte? A zettabyte is a digital unit of measurement. 1 zettabyte is equal to 1 sextillion bytes, which I said to Robert earlier on his show. I was like, that sounds sexy, no pun intended, but that's what's called 1 sextillion bytes, or 10 to the 21st, which is 1 with 21 zeros behind it. All right. What does that really mean? A zettabyte is equal to a trillion gigabytes. Wow. So you're trying to tell me, basically speaking, that we have this whole thing, and boy, is it bullish in itself, where basically speaking, back to this, that it's only going to increase total volume of data created worldwide. So when we talk about Bitcoin was originally made, and it's that peer-to-peer cash system of the white paper, and then you hear people like Michael Saylor saying that increasing the whole thing of block sizes, and we talked about the whole thing with BSV, very impressive, right? You know what I mean? Like going with Terranode, millions to billions of TPS and so on. And I get it, Jasmy, as far as TPS, don't even compare. But when you see this, as far as where the data is going to be stored and how much that is going to be worth, if we just got 1% of whatever that's going to be for the future, not even by 2045, right? What would the data be by 2030? It's incredible. That is worth mentioning. That's worth saying, I'm not going to be forget what I got on a Saturday night. I want to talk about this stuff. And it began back to this, against the backdrop of this massive surge in data generation, data marketplaces bring 3 core benefits. And were you aware? It's firstly, they empower individuals, organizations to monetize their proprietary data, which they're automatically producing. And who is a huge proponent of that in Japan? It's Jasmy. But do they have it going on as we speak? No. But will they have it going on when they scale up? I think the answer is yes. So they position themselves in 2 main key aspects. This layer 2 scaling solution with AI, right, with optimism, and then also for storing, right, the actual data, a Web3 storage solution. That's why we went with Polkadot, that layer 0. So the IoT user-generated content means that they're leaving behind digital footprints and rich data, or in this case, like the Japanese have pointed out, platinum data. Do you ever wonder why they call it those names? Do you think those are just nothing burgers? No, they thought this out. Data marketplaces allow individuals, businesses to profit from this internal data by making it externally available to be purchased, or to be paired up with other, local denominations. Remember how we talking about the whole thing of watch out for 2024 with the pairings? Do you understand how huge that is? Even DD in itself, Jasmy paired up with DD, Data Democratization Coin, and having that tied into the government, and then being able to go on a bullet train or whatever the case be, or autonomous vehicle, right? And a portion of that not only helps you as in a person that has a PDL and this token of Jasmy, but it contributes to the society, right? Society 5.0 for the future is absolute game changer, because when you look more into the broader picture of things, you understand as constant utility in motion. And most of these people may not even realize it's even tied into crypto. We've used these examples so many times. I want to share this with you too. Businesses realizing the importance of external data, right? Talks about the value of this. Look at this for a second. What about supply and demand? The demand for external data capital is rising. 92% of firms agree that they need to increase their use of outside data sourcing. Why? Because enriching proprietary data with outside insight allows businesses to make more confident decisions, optimize their predictive models, boost productivity, increase return on investment. It's a win-win. Of course, there's a lot of mention about data as a service. I already covered that. I want to take you now to this whole thing about Twitter, because we did talk about this for a second. Okay. So let's bring it to there. And if anything, I'm going to take a drink real quick because I need to. All right. So on this, okay, let's take you to this. Were you aware that when it comes to Twitter, and we talk about Elon Musk's problem with Japan, well, he has a problem, and that is data privacy problems, violations, you name it, right? Like I mentioned in the past, getting a memo, or maybe he's aware of it because he's just into everything. But I'm sure he has a team of people to help him. And that is recognizing that Japan is the second largest market for X, formerly known as Twitter. How so? Well, look at this. United States, number of Twitter users by country. United States obviously ranks number 1 and Japan ranks number 2. So 50 plus million from Japan. Okay. Twitter users by country 2024. Twitter, now known as X, is a popular social media platform. We know about that, right? But it says understanding a number of Twitter users by country is crucial for brands looking to expand their reach and engage with the global audience. How many Twitter users are in like India? Again, think about Bajit. Even India ranks up there. But back to this whole thing about Japan. Number of users, 51.8 million. Japan ranks second in terms of number of Twitter users. The platform has a large active user base, of course, in the country. All right. Take a look at this. How long ago was this published? I had to give you something new. I was going to give you guys something that was from like 2 years ago. This is pretty fresh. This is from Business Insider. And this is going to get super juicy, just like the other stuff about, talking about, zettabytes and stuff like that. Elon Musk wants to sell more Teslas in Japan. Here's why that could be tricky. And again, back to the whole thing of what? Platinum data, especially platinum data as a service. Doesn't Jasmy promote that? Didn't they mention that a long time ago, especially in their white paper? Have they mentioned that in numerous Medium articles? Yes, they have. January 28, 2024, not that long ago, right? About less than a week, talks about how Elon Musk back in 2010 predicted that Japan would become Tesla's largest market outside the US. Why is that? But more than a decade later, EV market or maker isn't doing well in the country as Musk had hoped. Here's a quote. There are some geographies where our market share is remarkably low, like Japan. Musk said in a fourth quarter earnings call earlier this week. We should at least have a market share proportionate to, say, other non-Japanese car makers like Mercedes, BMW, which we do not currently have yet. But while Tesla is already up against major Japanese car makers like Toyota, Honda, Suzuki, Nissan, the reality is that all EV makers are struggling to make an impact in Japan. But why is that? EV sales have soared in recent years in the US and Europe, but Japan has been slow to sell all electric cars, despite being one of the world's biggest automakers. Might have to do with declining birth rates, right? We know this. But one of the reasons is that hybrids have tended to dominate the Japanese market, and the sales of the cars seem to beat out combined shares of gasoline, diesel, according to that 2023 report from Bloomberg. In Japan, hybrids are popular because they are affordable, reliable, since they don't rely on the existence of strong charging infrastructure, according to the Bloomberg report. Leaders appear reluctant to pivot away from this strength. Toyota's chairman, head of Japan Automotive Association, who's Akio Toyoda, has previously accused the Japanese media exaggerating the commercial and environmental advantages of EVs, calling the benefits a mirage. But the bottom line is this. You see all this thing about the hesitancy of this. You see how, for instance, Japanese car makers have plans to boost their EV efforts. But Toyota itself said it would roll out 30 battery electric vehicle models by 2030, while Honda wants EVs and hydrogen fuel cell cars to make up 100% of sales by 2040. But Tesla and Toyota did not immediately respond to this report. But my thing is this for you guys, is understanding the bigger picture. Back to this whole thing of what we have in regards to this data marketplace. So this data marketplace talks about when it comes to platinum data, big data, using information to make a better experience. And remember how Jasmy talked about data harmon, or what is it called? The data harmonious data harmonization. Excuse me. The harmonization comes from the fact of using people's likes and dislikes to pair them up with other like-minded individuals. Elon Musk, yeah, he has these sensors on the front of his vehicles and the back and so on that's on these Teslas, but that beams out, for instance, to uh, you know, to the satellites, if you will, and to guide people through, traffic and whatnot. What about taking that to the next level? What about taking that to the level where, you know, you're literally gathering not just data of where people are going to, but you can actually solve an issue of what exists in Japan when it comes to specific types of data and those data sets. Say what you want. If X platform in itself has a problem about data privacy on X, then Elon Musk needs to, I guess you could say, get with the picture, and I think he will at some point, and recognize maybe the ones already established. Some people say it's a stretch, and my main thing is this: it's not, the research tonight is not me saying that Elon Musk would choose Jasmy, but even if he didn't choose it, I think the evidence supports the whole notion that, wow, we have this whole thing of just, it's not about Jasmy controlling all this data. It's just getting a piece of the pie. And that's why I pointed this out with Filecoin. When we talk about ITFS, what is it called? Or IPFS, interplanetary file storage or file system, right? It's a big, big deal, because when you look more into the bigger picture, you have all this, right? And there's numerous examples of comparing this data and where it's really valuable. The privacy laws for Japan could put X, formerly known as Twitter, in alignment of where they need to be for the future. If Elon Musk, let me stop the share on this, is really truly serious about this whole problem that exists in Japan, because Japan ranks number 2 as far as the most amount of users, and the people of Japan are embracing not centralized data marketplaces, but decentralized data marketplaces, and you already have solutions that are emerging, these innovators, then I think at some point he couldn't possibly dismiss, the utility of a personal data locker, or where the data is going to be stored on a Web3 cloud storage solution, right? With, what Jasmy's going to do with, for instance, this layer 0 with Polkadot. So when you go back to the whole thing of zettabytes and all these things about scalability, are you not that much more bullish on the future ahead for Jasmy? I think I am. And if anything, when I looked more into it and I saw that whole thing about the zettabytes, and I saw this whole thing about this new report, Ultimate Guide to the Data Marketplace of 2024, and recognizing Twitter's problem, X's problem, where you want to call it, and then also recognizing that 1 zettabyte is equal to 1 trillion gigabytes, and recognizing that in the future, this is going to be more data that keeps growing and growing and growing. I guess you could say in these containers, or these things for storage. You come to a conclusion that, wow, the bigger picture is the value of specific data sets. That's why I gave you that whole outline of different forms of data. So with that said, that's going to conclude the Jasmy coverage of the night. I know that's quite a bit to get into, but look, I can't give you an answer on how much is this all going to be worth. I'm not a fortune teller, but I mean, come on, guys. 1% of trillions of gigabytes? You don't think that's going to be worth a lot? I think it's going to be worth a ton. And if anything, I'm going to look into DCA more into Jasmy.